Well, hello, today I'm setting saddler's rivets. I'm actually setting brass ones. Now, saddler's rivets, I like them. They're very, very strong. And once you've secured something with a saddler's rivet, it's pretty well nigh on impossible to separate the items. So if it's a couple of bits of strong belting, it will take your weight, just one rivet. I'm not suggesting you put your life on the line, but no, they are very, very strong. So I like to use them. I think they also look very nice and they're nice and traditional. Now, brass ones in the UK, they're quite hard to get hold of. Tandy leather do them, so mention that. Tandy do, I think it's 3 different sizes. I've got a couple of them here. So I've got the number 12s, which are the smaller ones, and they're roughly, I think 9mm roughly across. Yeah, they're about 9mm across the head. So that's the number 12s. And then they also do some bigger ones, which are number 9s, bizarrely. This is where it gets a bit confusing, which are close to 12mm across the head. So that's always the case with rivet numbering, but yeah, the number 9s are the bigger ones. So getting on for 12mm across the head there. Anyway, what I'll do in this film, I'll show you how I set them. The Tandy rivets, as I say, are particularly hard, so slightly different technique. I have already popped a film up on setting copper saddler's rivets. And I should also add that there are several ways that you can set a rivet. I'm going to be setting these ones fairly flush down, which actually is quite nice. So let's get going. Now, a few tools you need for this one. First of all, a hitting surface. And one of these cheap anvils. They're not hardened, they're just a cheap sort of anvil shaped objects. This is a 28-pound one in weight. It's quite a good surface. It does mark with the brass rivets, so you'd need to probably sand that off afterwards, but it's a nice hitting surface. I use Knipex nippers for cutting rivets. You could use something else, but I find these give you quite a nice close cut and you get a fair bit of leverage on the handles. So I find them quite good. They're Knipex, K-N-I-P-E-X. And some sort of hammer, so a ball pein hammer, rounded end hammer. And this one, I think, is an 8-ounce, or is it a 4? 8-ounce, yeah, it's an 8-ounce hammer. It's quite a nice weight. With the ball on the different hammers, worth trying to get one that has a slightly sort of prouder ball that is more pointy, because then you can get into more sort of narrow spaces, but not critical. Anyway, ball pein hammer, and then a rivet setting tool. And that is basically a bit of hardened steel with a hole going up it. They also often have a little cupped in end. Now, I personally don't think these are designed terribly well, and I may well at some point make my own some silver steel, and I'll pop a film on doing that. If you don't have a rivet setting tool, you can just use a block of hardwood with a hole in it and hit it with a hammer. You'll get the same effect, and it's a perfectly okay bodge. And ditto, if you don't have these cutters, you could use ordinary pliers. It would be a bit harder, but it would work. So you don't need, complicated tools or anything. So first thing, punch some holes in the leather you want to join. So I've got the side of a mail bag here, and I'm going to be putting 3 rivets in. So I've got my holes already punched. Pop my rivets in. Turn it over and get your washers. Now the washers often have 2 sort of sides to them. It's where they're punched out. There's a square shoulder and a slightly more rounded shoulder. So I always try and put the rounded shoulder slightly up front. Just feel it looks neater. 1 or 2 of these are actually quite off centre. It doesn't matter, but I notice they're just a bit off. So punch them down. So I'm using my rivet setting tool, a tool with a hole. You could, as I say, just drill a hole in a block of wood. As I have it, I'm using a nylon hammer to hit metal. Now, that sets the rivet down, but what's worth doing, and that's why I feel these tools aren't always the best design, is just rotate the tool a couple of times, because that will evenly sink the head of the rivet below the surface of your leather. If you don't do that, you'll find that the rivet will be slightly proud on the surface, which wouldn't be very nice. So I'll just repeat that. Again, I'm just hitting them round all angles. I know in the States you can get the round rivet setters, and I do think they're better design. Right. So that's your rivets. I'm just putting my finger over to check they're all fairly flush, and that's nice. Next job is to cut the stalk. Now, you want your cutters to be at the right sort of height for cutting. These rivets are particularly hard, so I actually cut the stems very short, and it's a lot easier. You get a flasher finish, and it generally, I think, looks neater as well. So I wouldn't cut these too high. Now, to get the spacing, I'm using a little bit of pigskin leather. So it's very, very thin leather. It's only a couple of ounces or so. And you just want to cut it fairly close. And again, this is tip number 2. If you just try, normally with a copper rivet, you can just close the cutters and it will pop off easily. With these, you'll find that it will take a huge amount of pressure, and it'd be quite difficult. So what I do is I rotate the cutter. I do a cut, rotate the cutter, press again, and I do it like in 3 different places, and then it just shears off. And there is a sort of safety thing to bear in mind here, because the stalk whips up in the air as it cuts. So you do need to have something over your eyes as a bit of protection, or become very good at shutting your eyes the second that pops. But it is potentially quite dangerous, so I would advise you to wear safety glasses. So another cut there. You can put your hand over as well, but you'll probably need both your hands for strength. And that's off. As you can probably see there, I've cut that really quite close down. It's sticking up about 1 millimeter. So now what I do is I'm going to flatten that. So that's it flattened. And then using my ball pein, the rounded end of the hammer, I go around. I'm going to go around and get rid of the lip. There's like a 0.5 millimeter little lip. So I'm just going to round that all over. Check it with your finger. And make sure it's all nice. There's no little edge sticking up. That's good. I like that. Another little safety things, like little safety tips today, most unlike me. Ear defenders. They are worth wearing. If you're doing a lot of riveting, I would certainly recommend you have some ear defenders. When I do a batch, I always put the ear defenders on. So that's the idea really. That gives you a nice flush, smooth set brass rivet. So a bit more hard these ones, so hence the slightly different approaches. So there you are, fairly straightforward. I hope you found that one useful, and thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.